I've been very interested in all the discussion since yesterday, and it really makes me feel that all of us are searching in our cities, searching for the truth, searching for a way out for all our problems. And it doesn't matter whether it's Detroit or the slums of Bombay. The principles of what we want to do and what we want to achieve to have a more humane city, I think, stay the same. The numbers of people that we're talking about are drastically different. So the cities in the south, in Africa, in Bombay, you're talking about 60 to 70% of people living in slums, which is different from Detroit. And so our strategies are a little different. And maybe at some point it would be good to see at which points we meet and at the things that we could learn from you and you could learn from us. So Slum Dwellers International started in 1996. It's a network of slum dwellers. And the idea was that they were sick and fed up of people like me talking about them. And so they said, we need to have our own network, our own voice, to be able to talk to our cities directly. One of the biggest issues that the slum dwellers had in the late 70s and 80s, and some cities continue to have it even today, is that of evictions. And their only solution was to actually protest and fight the city back. And in the late 70s, the leadership among the slum dwellers realized that doing that was just a waste of a lot of energy and wasn't actually helping to build a relationship with the city. It's that realization that actually helped the leadership to create a network of slum dweller federations in different cities. And the idea was that they would be able to find solutions and take it to the city and present alternatives for problems that the city did not have solutions for. So for example, evictions, the city saw them as a headache. You're squatting there on the streets of Bombay. You want the road to look clean. You come with a demolition squad. You break your houses. They go away. They disappear. They come the next day. They build again. So you really never solved the problem because it was ad hoc. It was short term. And that's when the leadership started thinking long term. And the two main strategies that the Federation actually uses to organize these communities is money and information. And they believe that the rich and the middle class have the power of money and information that the poor don't have. So if these poor communities are able to save, even though it's little money every day, the money, in fact, is a mobilizing factor that helps to organize these communities. Similarly, with information, over the last 20 years, slum dweller federations in over 33 cities now are collecting data about themselves. They are mapping their settlements. They're doing settlement profiles. They're doing household enumerations, all with the idea of creating an identity for themselves in the city. This is information that the cities don't have about them. It's ironic, but they say the difference between a developed city and a developing city is that in a developed city, the city knows what's happening on every piece of their land. In our city doesn't know what's happening in more than 50% of the lands where people live, and they're completely invisible. So these communities don't figure out on any census records. These communities don't figure out on our master plans. They're basically invisible. So one of the ideas of the enumeration process, and it's very interesting, yesterday somebody mentioned the Santa Fe Institute. These group of scientists have now partnered along with the Slum Dwellers Federation, and we are trying to see how we can actually create a database and a matrix to actually understand the scale of the problem in these different cities. And to create our own database, because we've seen that slum dwellers are able to collect accurate data about themselves, and they have the bandwidth to actually go deep and go into places where normal researchers and middle-class people would not go. And they use the whole idea of data collection as a means for mobilizing these communities and building the federation. So these are the two main strategies. But having said that, now let me give you 3 examples. The intention of my talk is to able to get across to you how poor communities build their capacity to talk to their cities. And they have been able to do so successfully in many cities. So besides savings and besides doing their enumerations, they've been able to take on slum upgrading projects. And they're slowly looking at other public places, like their market, the informal marketplace, and they're looking at ways in which they can find solutions that work for themselves and the city. So quickly, I'll just run through these pictures. This is the city of Pune, and this is a slum upgrading project that the Federation took for 7 cities, for 7 settlements inside the city. Pune is on the west coast of India. Now, if you look at this picture, you will see that there are different kinds of structures. You will see permanent structures, semi-permanent structures, a mix of both. Like you see tin sheets with a concrete house there. So it's very ad hoc. It's different types of different materials, plastic, you know. So you can know the age of a settlement looking at how many permanent structures there are in a settlement, because if the settlement hasn't been evicted recently, then people kind of feel secure to build with brick. But you see, it's very ad hoc. As they feel secure, then they may go up, they put a tin sheet. This is the inner lanes of the settlement. See, the densities are very high, very little open space. This is when the houses slowly go up. I just thought showing you more pictures gives you a context than me talking. Here you see a permanent structure on the left-hand side close to a completely, we call it kacha, impermanent structure next to it. So the whole idea of the slum, this is the space inside the house. So the space is used for socializing during the day. During the night, it turns into a bedroom. They cook in the same place. They have their bath in the same place. So it's a little space that most architects would not really actually know how to design, because they do it, it's very ingenious. So you're not glorifying this, but you can take this concept and actually build on this, and that's what the communities did. This actually just shows us that the negotiation started in 2008, so the time when the actual construction took place was in 2010. So it took a good 2 years for the construction to begin after the project was sanctioned. So lots of the risks is around cities not knowing how to deal with poor communities. Most of our bureaucrats and most of our IAS education doesn't really teach government on how to talk to the other half of their city. They don't even have a language, and they don't feel comfortable doing that. And so a lot of time goes in building that trust and negotiating for things that they have never done before with contractors. So this is a completely new game, and many government officials are open, and they're ready and willing to work with poor communities, which is interesting. And you will see here that building norms and standards is a big issue, because the city has its building norms and standards. Poor communities do their own thing. So each time negotiating for those kind of things create delays. So this is the cadastral map of one of the pockets of those 7 settlements that you saw. That's how we start. Communities normally do their own map, and then we get a surveyor to do a proper map like this. And then they marked out the houses that needed to be redeveloped immediately, those that could wait, those that were permanent, that didn't need redevelopment, those with very little money. You see, so this was their own internal survey of how they wanted to prioritize their redevelopment. This is the homework that the community had to do much before that they started construction, which was creating a file for every family, along with the municipal corporation, to make sure that their records were in order. This is when they start actually playing with the space that they had. So there were 3 kinds. So you had houses with very little, less than 270 square feet space, and that was a challenge. So they actually had to realign certain houses, and they had 2 kinds of models which they created. Here they're playing around with the space that they have with different paper models to see what could fit in different spaces. But out of this exercise, so you see they refused to go. Now the easiest thing, if the people were not organized in that community, what the government would have done was just gone multi-storied. They would have gotten a developer and gone multi-storied. It's because the community had the confidence to actually take on something like this. They told the city, no, we want the community to stay the way it is in the same footprint, and we'll just readjust and realign the houses that need redevelopment. So that was a huge victory, because cities don't listen to that easily. This is the community showing their designs to the city, to the corporation, to the local corporator who's a politician. So these were the two models. So these were the individual houses that were very small, very little, about 137 square feet. But the way they got more space was to go ground plus one or go ground plus two, vertically upwards. So they got more space at the end of the redevelopment. And this, with poor communities, you can't show them little models. They get some sense, but not a complete sense. So we normally have life-size house model exhibitions where people can walk in and put their kitchen and put their mat and put their bed and get a sense of space. So this is how it would look. These were the single structures put together, single houses. And then there was a second design for the cluster houses. So these were for houses that were really tiny and that did not have space. So negotiating with all those families to say, let's collectivize, build a common building where we all get better houses was very difficult, because when you break people's homes, they're not sure they'll ever get it back again. So unless the community leadership is really organized and have the trust of their community, this doesn't happen. So after long negotiations, these families agreed to break their houses, demolish them, and then have a common floor upland for all of them. Yeah. These are individual houses. Over time, the Federation has decided that it needs to do more than just housing, and work and shelter are very closely related in poor communities, and many of you are aware with cities in the South know that. Most of these settlements have their marketplace right in the middle of the community or on the periphery. This is Toy Market in Nairobi, in Kenya, and there were huge communal violence riots there about 3 years ago, and the market is now back in action. But the Federation, who are mostly slum dwellers, who sell at this market, have decided that they want to go with a proposal to the city for the redevelopment of this market. Now, this is where some of you who may be interested in working in cities in the South could actually give us ideas on how we can do a better job out of this. So this is what the toy market looks from above. They're recycling their vegetables, so whatever is left over, they take home. These are the market vendors who've started savings groups. See, the savings becomes a very important element for the communities to actually start organizing themselves. So because when they save, they see an objective, they see something in front of them where they feel that they can come together and do something. And this is the kind of information collection that the community does, the kind of businesses, the kind of structures, basically the kind of structures in the market. You see there's a church, goods, commodities, a community hall, manufacturing, services. This is the type of business, retail, wholesale. And this is a matrix showing the type of business to the type of structure. So you have different types of structures from, open carts, to carts that can be moved, to stalls that are locked up at night. So just getting an understanding of what this is. This is Accra, the Mandela Market in Accra, right bang next to the municipal corporation. And these are all informal markets. Most of the vendors here are women. No toilets. They sit all day and they're selling their goods. No pathways, you see the road. No water facility, no place you can go and wash up or clean up. Still Accra. So when you speak to them, this is basically what they're asking for. The physical conditions are so bad that they want proper infrastructure, services. They're beginning to think now they need to create a voice and representation for themselves, because they had never really thought about this before as market traders. And this is in Uganda. This is the mayor in the city of Kampala, talking to the market dwellers, assuring them that they can be upgraded and that they will get their stalls back. Because nobody trusts a mayor when he says, we're going to upgrade you. You don't know whether you're ever going to get your thing back. This is the community consulting each other, very nervous before the local enumeration is going to start because they don't know what it means. This is the community trying to map and understand their space. Then they do a proper cadastral map showing all the stalls in the market. This is the city of Ginger, the Rubaga market. Actually, all of them had licenses, and they had secure tenure. Now, this was unusual because we didn't see that in the other 3 markets. So basically, communities want to make a difference in their lives. They want to make a difference to the city. And many cities are now, and enlightened mayors like the mayor of Ilu are now beginning to realize that poor communities are basically an asset. And investing in them and actually working with them creates public goods, not just for the poor community, but for the rest of the city. Thank you.
Yeah.